Welcome to the RGB show.
That we are.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Carl.
And of course,
sometimes Billy.
When he speaks.
Yeah.
I don't think my microphone's working. I was talking that whole time.
So this week we're doing a little bit differently. We're doing a bit of a deep dive analysis on the RTX launch from Nvidia, giving you a bit of our overview and insights into what we think's happening and where it's going and what it's going to be like.
Just whilst I'm schooling these noobs in the background.
Yeah, may or may not forgot my controller.
So, I mean, you'd have to be under a rock if you haven't obviously seen the announcement or...
What was the announcement?
You might be one of the 300 million people that asked me today when we're getting stopped.
Yeah. The RTX 3000. My first sort of impressions were, I think that from my impressions of the whole launch event, it was a real big push. I don't think they're competing, to be too honest, with just AMD. I think the real big push this generation is going to be trying to win over essentially the potential console purchasers.
Yeah.
From my sort of look at it, it's one of those situations where they had to bring out all the cards because this year is going to be brutally, that
was a slam.
Painful for I think most of these companies in terms of trying to gain market share, especially with the economic situation that everyone's in. Their forecasts that they had, planned at the beginning of the year for how they were expecting, obviously, their products to turn out and how many units they were planning to ship and all that sort of stuff. Those sorts of numbers are generally planned 12 months ahead of time. And I think that's where they're going to be really heavily, aggressively fighting for every sale, I think, especially with everyone being in lockdown and with, obviously, the whole COVID situation.
What's that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's my sort of take on it. I think it's more a shot at the consoles. They had to give you significantly more performance because of the fact that if they only gave you that 20% gain, it wasn't going to be enough to justify the purchase of a single component versus a whole console. I'm not sure what your take on the situation is.
I mean, RIP anyone who bought a 2080 Ti recently. Other than that,
games go fast now.
Yeah, really fast. I'm just amazed at how they've kept the prices down. I want to know how they've done it.
Well, they didn't. They just fucked everyone. They just fudged everyone over last generation. The prices have always been around 600 US, 700 US. And then all of a sudden the 20 series came out and ray tracing and DLSS and then...
So you reckon they were just making stonks?
Pretty much. Well, they had a record low for consumer GPUs last year.
Huh.
Yeah. So they obviously need to get back on the train of being the best, and I think they've shown that they're capable of doing it again, especially for a reasonable price.
Mm.
I think a bit of that, though, too, is the fact that they know that they can't charge more for these cards because of the fact that with everyone in a financial situation where got mass unemployment around the world in a lot of countries, they can't afford to charge more for these cards. Yeah. So I think that's something to do with it. I think the other thing is it's one of those situations where I reckon they got an absolute stellar deal from Samsung to produce these chips in their fab, because Samsung's fab was pretty much doing very little in terms of actual customer contracts. It made sense. Nvidia has the ability to inject a lot of cash into Samsung's fab business, and I think that it was a partnership from both sides. I think it meant that Nvidia could sort of use some of the their fab, obviously, and Samsung gains some obviously much needed IP in producing and tweaking these chips, because it is a custom process. So Nvidia must have had their engineers, working directly with Samsung engineers to get that sweet spot, I think. Because I mean, the CUDA core count, let's be honest, it's not what they're claiming it to be. The way that they're calculating CUDA cores now is the fact that it basically, think of it as hyperthreading for essentially CUDA cores. That's how they've got these numbers. That's essentially simultaneous multi-threading is essentially how they got these numbers. Because there's no way you could fit that amount of transistors into Samsung's 8nm process. It is just physically impossible to double the transistor count on a node that isn't much more refined as...
But they did.
Huh?
They did double the transistors.
No.
They almost doubled the transistors.
Yeah, but I don't think it's actually all CUDA core.
No.
Because I mean, to get that ray tracing performance, they've had to do some. It'd be interesting to see exactly like a schematic on how they actually are claiming these CUDA core numbers, though.
It would be, and the fact that it's exactly double, like, it is pretty, like.
Because I mean, 2 FP32
emoji.
floating point operations per clock cycle per CUDA core.
That's a screamer.
That sort of plays into the fact that, well, okay, it can do twice as much work per clock, hence twice the CUDA core. But yeah, I mean, I just don't know how much more refined Nvidia's 8nm Samsung process versus Samsung's normal 8nm process actually is.
I don't think it would be much more. I mean, the 3070 is what, 80 watts higher TDP than the 2070?
Notice though that there is still a large amount of room to put a Super or TI variant above the 3070 and above the 3080.
Oh yeah. Well, we've got a 2080 Ti and then a double 2080 performance. Where's the in between? There isn't.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something there.
I think they're holding their cards close to their chest, waiting for a Navi.
Lenovo, is that a brand? Yeah.
Lenovo,
the
IBM.
Legion, the Legion
used
company.
to be.
Yeah. They didn't they leak a 16 gigabyte variant of the 3070?
Yeah. It was in a slide advertised on one of their marketing pages. It's gone off the website now.
Of course it has, but it'd be on like video
But
cards
again,
or something.
whether or not they're actually going to come back out with a TI branding again, or if they're going to go strictly down the path of the Super and get rid of the TI.
I think TI was cool. I didn't like Super. It just felt like a band-aid solution to Navi at the time.
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter is that they sort of lost their way. I remember when they had the GTS and the GTX branding.
Yeah.
And then the GS branding. I think the biggest thing is that it's one of those situations where it's very confusing for the consumer though. Because you think that the cards are almost identical to their nameplate. The 2060 Super versus the 2060. The 2060 Super's almost as fast as a 2070. It's got very, very closely tied to the 2070, more so than the 2060. So, I think that muddies the water a bit, because someone that's not, tech savvy goes and buys a 2060, not realizing that the performance that between the two different variants. And I mean, for tech savvy people, they know what to look for, but for the non-tech savvy community,
like the person today who I told not to buy a 2080 Super and wait for the 3080, even though they're working 970, still bought a 2080 Super.
Yeah,
they're the sorts of people.
Yeah, I mean, some people just don't really, aren't really worried. But I mean, I've already looked on eBay Australia, and I've already seen 2080 Ti's on eBay, which I mean isn't the cheapest place to find them. You've got Gumtree, you've got Facebook Marketplace, but I mean they're already selling $1,000 cheaper, $1,000 cheaper than what they are currently new.
Yo.
Yeah, I had a look as well.
They're about $800 at the moment. The cheapest one on our website, $1,799.
Yeah, I was looking at 2080 Supers on eBay. There was some going for like $450 with like minutes to go on
Yeah.
the auction.
Yo.
There was one that was sold for just under $600.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think that's where the smart money will shop, especially when Navi comes out, because if Navi is very competitive as well, you know, you're going to have a lot of people probably flipping their cards, especially with the government handouts, the funny money that's being
Exactly.
printed at the moment.
I think at this stage, the only real hope for these people is to sell them as whole systems, to people that you know,
Just want a computer. For
just need a
Christmas.
computer. Their
I
first
think the
computer sort of
fact
thing.
that they've been given, you know, sort of free money, you know, for a lot of these people, it's one of those things where I don't think they care. As long as they've got enough money to cover the cost of the replacement card,
Yes.
it's not like they're trying to make a profit. I think scalpers, though, will definitely on the 3000 series will
They're
try and
gonna
make a
ruin
profit.
it. Yep. And it's also the 3080 falls very neatly into the $1,500 zip pay thing as well,
Yep.
which is nice to see. Which puts it into everyone's budget.
Yeah, especially with the you know, take it home now, pay it off.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
in-home lay-by sort of concepts that are out there at the moment.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see as well that tech with the I mean, let's take just talking to myself in my head. Take a step back here and PCI generation. So Intel have really screwed the pooch on this one
No.
because we're talking Gen 3 now. We don't like realistically. Are you saturating the bandwidth? Well, it's neither here nor there. But if you look at the benchmarks of a 5700 XT, it does run faster over a Gen 4, even if it's only by a couple of percent in a few games. Now, if you look at the performance of the 3080 and it's supposed to be at least double that,
Yeah.
you're already talking, you know, like it's going to make a difference.
I think the biggest thing is the RTX IO, where it streams in assets straight off a fast SSD.
that's the other point that I was getting towards was the
I
fact that
think
you
that's
can
going to
do
be
that.
where the bandwidth bottleneck's going to be, because you've got to remember that has to essentially stream that data in over a PCI Express bus
Yep.
into the graphics card VRAM. If there's not enough bandwidth, that's going to limit essentially how fast that will work.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be as much of a concern with the 3070
No.
and below,
But with the G6X,
3080,
especially on that, like
Yeah.
the 3090 on what was it, 380 bit bus,
yeah,
386 or something, and then you've got the prices on NVMe's coming down anyway, like flash memory rather. But you've also got specifically Gen 4 NVMe's being attainable now.
I don't think you need even Gen 4 at this stage for some of those games, though. I played around with my desktop PC last night. I booted it for the first time in about a month. But I was playing around with the two Samsung NVMe SSDs that I've got in there currently, and I was dragging a 6 gigabyte file from one SSD to the other, and it took less than 10 seconds to transfer 6 gigabytes of data. That's how fast. It's like nearly 2 gig. It was just insane. Like the progress bar goes that quickly, but I had to repeat it a couple of times to see if it to try and get the number.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of the tech that they're going to be using for their asset streaming and stuff, isn't going to be like transferring a large file. It's going to be
they're going to be compressed. They're going to be compressed files, so they'll actually decompress them on the fly. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm sort of was looking at 6 gig because I mean the memory buffer on these cards is 8 gigabyte on the 3070. So
on the 3080. So
yeah,
6 is a good sort of
so it's sort of 6 gigs, sort of seeing what that time frame was going to actually, how much of a reduction we were actually going to get with RTX IO.
I'm not
to
very
me-
good at this game, am I?
To me, I think that
Try and
there's
stay
no
back when
doubt
things
in my
happen.
mind, no absolute doubt in my mind that AMD have got a similar tech because they worked,
With
hand in
Sony.
hand building the new consoles.
Mm.
They knew what was coming. The RDNA, Radeon Technologies Group team would have been working hand in hand with these technicians to sort of optimize these APUs for that purpose. So there's going to be some sort of on level, on console and on obviously Nvidia, and now of course AMD's potential GPUs, it's going to change the game again, I think, for gaming. And I think it was one of those situations where you look at what Nvidia did, and they pretty much had an answer for everything that the consoles were doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They had an answer for it already there. It was one of those situations where you can see very heavily consoles were where they were heading. And I loved the fact that with their presentation, they weren't bashing other companies. They were going specifically after what they had and where they went in terms of performance. And they even admitted themselves that RTX 2000 series cards wasn't the level of product that they were envisioned that they wanted it to be. That they missed the mark, and they realized that, you know, during that product cycle that they did miss that mark. And I'm glad that they actually admit that you know, the structure of the pricing, the performance you were getting for that pricing, it missed that mark. And of course they've now sort of new course this time around. But me personally, I'm going to be really interested to see what the RTX 3060 and 3050, because there's no doubt in my mind that an RTX 3060 at around probably 1080, not Ti, but standard 1080, it's not 1080, 2080 level performance, because the 3070 is Ti level. So we'll probably see an RTX 3060 at around the 2080 level performance. And I think that the RTX 3050 will probably come in at around 2070 super level. And I think the reason for that is that they want to make, you know, ray tracing, DLSS, you know, gaming a, you know, technology that is present in every SKU up and down their stack this generation. I don't think they want to have a product out on the market.
On my team?
I honestly don't think they want a product out on the market that doesn't have ray tracing. Because, I mean, they doubled down on the fact that ray tracing was the future with the 2000 series. They've made that even more of a point this generation. Me personally, I think that we're going to see entry-level graphics cards in the, you know, $350 US price point, probably even cheaper, coming with some level of ray tracing.
Is DLSS only used on games that support it, or is it just something you can use on all games?
Currently, it's only on games that support it. Now, there was talk that there was going to be a DLSS 3.0, which would be, you know, basically, it's like turning on AA.
Yeah.
You just turn it on and it would work.
Yeah, but if it wasn't announced at that launch event, then
I don't think it was either ready, or it was one of those situations where, again, they were holding their cards to their chest to sort of wait for what AMD had to offer. Because it's one of those situations where, you know, they don't want to sort of give everyone everything at once. Because, I mean, you've got to remember that Nvidia like to stagnate their product launches, just like AMD, because it means that they get, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months worth of news coverage about their products. It means that is, you know, all the reviewers. Well, we've had a camera malfunction there.
Which one?
The Canon. It's come back. I don't know what it was doing.
Hasn't overheated.
Oh no, it looks like it's just the monitor that's cutting out. The stream's fine. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think it's one of those situations where I think for the most part, it's going to be a situation where they're going to play their cards close to their chest, wait to see what AMD come out with, what they offer, because there's no point throwing all their cards on the table when they don't have to do that just yet. They've given us enough performance to satisfy us for now, and then of course they'll counter if they need to. And it will depend on how quickly they want to counter, because I mean, again, they might want to drag the product, you know, cycle out like they did last time, you know, the 2080, and then of course 12 months later 2080 Super, so that they can, you know, capitalize on the product. Because I mean, a lot of money, R&D and effort goes into designing these products. It's not, especially that cooler. I mean, that cooler does look like it was thought out, and actually thought went into the actual design of it. as to how well it's going to perform, we'll have to wait and see. But
It was probably a situation of, hey, yo, Cooler Master. Hey, Cooler Master, is that Nvidia I'm hearing on the phone? Yeah, yo, what's up? Hey, just looking to get our hands on an actual decent cooler. We'll give you a fair price for each one. And then they were like, oh, sweet, we'll actually put some R&D into this cooler design.
Oh, to be honest with you, don't get me wrong. I mean, the 20 series at least went with dual axial, fan design cooler, which, I mean, for the most part, yeah, it was a absolute monstrously difficult product to disassemble, to the point where, I mean, you needed a teardown guide of a teardown guide just to tear it down. But I mean, Steve from Gamers Nexus, he himself struggled quite a bit, with some of the SKUs, trying to disassemble them. I think the whole controversy about the 12-pin and the placement of it, I mean, obviously it's not because they wanted to put it halfway down the card. I think it was a fact that's where the PCB itself physically ended.
You pointed out to me, and it makes, like when you have a look at the actual PCB and the cooler shroud where they are, it doesn't really have an option as to where it goes.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as it goes, I think the idea was to make the connector more discreet, so that it didn't sort of...
What a shot. Did you just get
protrude
destroyed by your own teammate?
Protrude out there.
That was a really nice shot. At least we saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though you didn't get it because your teammate's nice.
Now, my sort of theory, the fact that Digital Foundry ended up getting a card to actually
play with,
preview. I wouldn't say, I would say preview, because it's not really a review. Where, I mean, I don't know how I feel about that, because like it's one of those situations where I know that because it was paid content, like it was a paid thing. I believe that there was very stringent, contracts and things that they were allowed to say and show, and things that they weren't. But I mean, to me, it was one of those situations where it's just a little, I mean, that's the only bit of information we've been given, and the fact that it was a situation where...
That's the same guy I had on my team last game. I reported.
Don't think it gives. I don't think it gives a fair advantage to other tech review, outlets.
Look, let's be honest here. I heard that I heard that some dude from Digital Foundry had a card and was using it for stuff, and honestly don't have a fucking clue who that guy was, and I thought it had something to do with AMD's old Global Foundries fab. So I was very confused as to what it all meant, and after watching it, it just seemed like something for Nvidia to just have someone have it, so that there's more stuff for people to watch about the cards and keep the buzz around it going until reviewers do get there.
I understand that they wanted obviously a someone out there actually showing off their product, and I know that they probably were paid to do all the probably testing and analysis of the product. So that way then obviously Nvidia's internal testing wasn't biased to some extent. They could say that they had a third party independently test the card. But I mean, for me, it's just one of those situations where the fact that I like open and free news outlet. I like having mainstream media obviously, and having it so that there's more than one perspective, there's more than one view coming out. The fact that this is sort of very, not saying biased, but very deliberate, that only one outlet has access to the card, having only one outlet to give us that information, to me seems a little bit disingenuous. I'd prefer to have it where everyone had the opportunity to do their testing and offer a preview just the same, and everyone was on the same even playing field. So that way then you could go to your favorite tech site and get the information, rather than it being just all a
this
very
old dude
closed,
that I've never seen before in my life.
A closed, ecosystem, a closed, network. I prefer it to be a little bit more open, and having the ability for the likes of Hardware Unboxed and Gamers Nexus and Linus Tech Tips having that same opportunity, because it's like, well, okay, you sent a card to one company and no one else had whether or not it's just because they didn't want everyone to, leak stuff, I don't know. But I mean, these NDAs are, I mean, they're almost an encyclopedia in themselves.
They're getting worse.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's one of those situations where, from my perspective, I mean, most of the stuff would have been pretty, detailed in that NDA as what they could or could not, talk about. But I was a little bit, I think I felt a little bit uneasy that one outlet had access to it, and it was like, I'm not saying that they were cherry picked, but it's like, they only had that one voice essentially. And of course, it's one of those situations where now you look at his YouTube channel, it's going to get so much more traffic because he was the only one that has any actual real hands-on experience with this card. And to me, that sort of gives him a slightly unfair advantage, because when it comes to day one reviews, he's going to have way more to talk about because he's had the product for so much longer. And that to me just seems like a little bit bias in that regard.
Yeah, but I still think everyone's just going to wait for Steve's video on it.
Yeah.
That's what all the smart people do.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it's one. It's again, you got to remember the average person. They're going to look at RTX 30 something or other. That's the first video they're going to get. That isn't essentially a rehash of the actual live stream. And of course, that for us, we know where what tech sites that we like and which ones we prefer, where their stance is on how they present the news and their testing methodology and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, for the average person, they're going to be directed to this one YouTube channel.
But then again, the fact that the NDAs are so specifically strict, I mean, there's a chance that they do have these cards, but they can't say that they do have them.
But again, I mean, then why not have it in the NDA that everyone had the ability to do a technical preview of the product? Just like, it's, to me, that seems a little bit, don't get me wrong. I mean, the fact that we were able to get to see the product in action is great. I love that idea. But I think it's just one of those situations where I think it gives that particular YouTube channel and that particular media outlet some unfair advantage, because they're going to have way more time with this particular product. Because, I mean, I don't, from the tweets that I've got, a lot of other tech sites said, where's mine?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that if they were saying that, then obviously they haven't been given a card. I mean,
unless
they're probably
double bluffing.
Well, I mean, that's a possibility, but I mean, it just seems, I mean, the fact that it just, to me, it seemed a little bit, why not allow everyone to do the same, preview of the graphics card?
Tokyo Drift.
But I mean, let's move on to talking about more the king of the hill, the RTX 3090.
Big Daddy, 10,000 CUDA cores.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit of a monster. But I mean, if you have a look at the actual T-flops that it actually provides, it is only 6 T-flops higher than the 3080.
Yes, but 8K gaming without any notion of what game or, DLSS or...
DLSS. It was DLSS. 4K upsample with DLSS to 8K.
Well, then realistically, isn't that just 4K basically?
Well, yeah. I mean, but if it does actually look as good as native, this is the thing though.
Well, but the 2080 Ti could do 8K with DLSS because it could run the game at 4K.
To some extent, but again, was it as smooth as what this is going to be? I mean, you've got to remember that you're looking at,
because it's a faster card. Come on, go.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they were. If you have a look at it's one of those situations where in the preview of the card, they do show in some situations where you're looking at either 3080 over the 2080. They were upsampling from a much higher base resolution with DLSS and getting a much smoother experience, because even though that they were upscaling on the 2080 from 1080p to 4K, they were able to upscale from 2K almost to 4K and still actually maintain a much smoother experience, whilst also having a much higher base starting point for the actual upscaling. So, which is obviously going to allow for much better looking upscaling. But I mean, the consoles are going to be playing a lot of these tricks as well. There's no way in the world that you're going to get all these.
Are you kidding?
Teammate passed it.
I know. Is that what T-flop stands for? Tap flop? Because this guy's flopping all over my turtle with his lack of skills. Sorry, I was shocked at how bad my teammate is.
Yeah. So from that perspective, you know, you got to look at it like these consoles are going to be pulling out all the stops to make it look great at 4K, but with all the tricks under the hood to get it there. Because at the end of the day, like, I mean, they're going to be pushing these consoles, not necessarily in the first, you know, sort of launching phase, because they still want some overlap between existing console owners and new console owners. But I think as that progression comes through, and as of course now we've got, you know, all these new graphics cards on the gaming market, you know, for PC users, as that allows for developers to push these features through to the market, I think we're going to see obviously that they're going to be pulling out a lot of these tricks to get that performance.
Look, I know I'm bad, but this guy is on another level of bad. His brain is just not working. I think he's probably a government spy. You're like, my friend.
But yeah, as far as it goes, I mean, the launch, in my opinion, was a decent launch. I think that
a decent launch. Well, compared to the 2080, it was a fucking amazing launch.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I think we've, you know, all coming away. Again, though, too, like, it's one of those situations where, you know, based on the information we've currently got, because I mean, it's very scarce as to what AMD have got cooking in their labs.
Their oven.
It's one of those situations where we
just
don't know what level of performance we're actually going to get. Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're only going by, you know, the bit of information that we're getting leaked out from the consoles. We know more about what hardware they've integrated into the consoles and how they've optimized the consoles. All of our RDNA information has pretty much come out of the console space. We know that they're bringing out new cards. We know that they're going to obviously roughly hit, you know, 80 cores, whatever they decide to call the cores. If they obviously continue down the stream processor branding as what they have in the past, it's hard to say. It's hard to say how well these are going to scale, because you're looking at, you know, 56 compute units in the Xbox Series X, cut down to 52, I believe. I think it's 52. Have actually enabled cores.
Yeah, there's 4 redundant.
Yeah. So I mean, you think about it from that perspective, to have a console with those sort of level of specs hitting that sort of teraflop number that they're currently toying. Now, take away obviously the components that are not needed in a dedicated gaming card and clock those cores a bit higher. We know that they can hit over 2 gigahertz. The Sony console clearly proves that. For me, I think that we're going to have a really, really good battle on our hands.
I think this is probably going to be the best one since the 8800 GT.
I mean, it's going to be a really, really, really strong battle. I think AMD know where the consoles were heading, and of course, everything that the Nvidia card is currently sort of attacking in terms of features, you know, each, you know, tit for tat feature wise, you know, RTX IO, you know, obviously all the ray tracing performance that they've already got, you know, everything that the sort of the consoles have got, AMD have come up with an answer for in this generation. And I think that that's because they know that AMD are going to have a solid card. Now, I think that they're worried about it from 2 fronts, because AMD's got the market share already in console because they build the APU in every one that gets sold. So from Nvidia's side, it's one of those things where they've not only got essentially one competitor this generation, I think they've actually technically got 3. I think they've got...
Dude, that was a banger.
I think they've actually got 3 competitors. I think they've got AMD directly, Xbox, and Sony with the PlayStation. So with those three players in the market, it means Nvidia's got to really basically aim a lot higher. And I think that's one of the reasons why they also renamed the RTX 3090, because now they don't call it a Titan. It's now not a prosumer card. It's a consumer card. It's part of the 30 series. It's not a SKU that, sits in this mythical land that no one can ever obtain because no one can afford it. It's now been brought into the realm of not necessarily, a certainty, but a probability. You may be able to obtain this card as a mere mortal, rather than the RTX cards that were priced out of anyone's sort of realistic price budget. By bringing it down into that 30 series branding, they've now got essentially a card that when AMD were looking at aiming for the performance crown, you've got to now aim that that much higher. You've got that much more of a ladder to climb to compete, because you're not competing with a 30 series 80 series card anymore. You're competing essentially with a Titan.
Exactly, yep.
And of course, AMD could have always then marketed it as the fastest consumer card, because again, most people don't call the Titans consumer cards; they call them prosumer.
They're HEDT parts.
That's it. Now that it's been brought into that same 30 series branding, it means that it's now
human being.
Yeah, and it's significantly cheaper than other Titan variant cards.
Well, it's the same sort of price as a bloody 2080 Ti was at launch.
Yeah, well, that was what, $12.99?
Yeah, so it's only $200 more.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think that that's what they were aiming for. I think that that's one of the reasons why we didn't see a 3080 Ti branding out of the box. I think that that's going to be held back as an ace up their sleeve that they can always bring out. They could reshuffle the price stack then if they had to. They've got room to play, and I think that it's going to be a very, very interesting few months as to seeing how this all plays out.
Very much so. I'm very excited to see what AMD has.
Now, the last part of the whole situation is availability.
That's going to be a no from me, Chief.
I think that we're going to have essentially people back ordering these cards for ages. I think that limited supply. Personally, I think that that's going to come from 2 fronts: Samsung's yield on their 8nm node, and also the fact that Micron's the only company that actually has any of this GDDR6X branded memory in production. I think that that's basically put 2 significant eggs into the one basket.
Yeah, no, you're dead right.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, Samsung's yields, if you read any news articles, constantly say that they've had problems with yield and getting their nodes, into mass volume. Now, that may have been fixed with, obviously, Nvidia engineers helping Samsung, and that's why it's an optimized Nvidia 8nm node. That could have been some of the optimizations. They may have fixed some of the issues that they were having and managed to get yield up. But I mean, you still got all of the AOB partners: Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock, all of those companies, all going to be buying large volumes of this GDDR6X from the only company that make it. Hopefully we don't see an repeat issue as to what happened with the RTX 2000 series launch, where we had a lot of failure cards out of the box with memory related issues. If we see that again, that's going to obviously be even more demanding on supply, because that's what caused a lot of the issue at launch with that series, that RMA rates were relatively high, specifically on a few SKUs, that were using the GDDR6. Some of the cards that were using other branded GDDR6, like Samsung GDDR6, weren't as apparently heavily affected. It was only the Micron GDDR6 that were apparently causing some problems.
Well, let's hope Micron have pulled their finger out.
Well, I mean, obviously they've had to do some probably very in-depth validation with Nvidia. And if you have a look, this GDDR6X is an Nvidia sort of exclusive. It's not really a JEDEC specification. It's more of an Nvidia custom developed memory specification. So again, it's one of those situations where hopefully the optimizations that they've made were to improve obviously its reliability and obviously provide a more reliable launch of their RTX 3000 series. But I think we're going to have customers complaining that these cards are just not in stock.
Oh,
and
of course.
Right until I think early next year.
Oh, even beyond, I reckon. I think it'll be a while. What the hell are the retailers going to do with their stockpiled 2000 series cards? They're all going to be dead in the water by the time the 3070 comes around.
Yeah. And as far as it goes, whether or not they offer some major incentives on those cards to make them compelling, it's going to be hard. I think, to be honest with you, it's going to be one of those situations where for system integrators, they're going to have to chuck them into builds and get them out the door. I think that's going to be the only way to sort of push these cards very heavily
Did you win?
out into the market.
Garbage.
Because a lot of people already are looking at either returning or cancelling cards to get the 30 series because they realised that they had made a bit of a dirt move and were basically jumped the gun and bought a card that was essentially obsolete before they walked out the door with it. Don't get me wrong though, I think that your 70 card is going to be compelling.
Your
but I think that
2060s and stuff are still going to be great. But
those cards I think are going to be the ones that you're going to have hard time selling, because I think that there'll be some more incentive to buy sort of the tiers up the stack, like you're essentially your RTX 30 a 2080 Super and above. I think, and to some extent probably even the 2070, depending on how much they discount these cards by though.
Well, I was thinking that the higher end ones are going to be the ones that are hard to sell, because there's not a 30.
It's depending on how aggressive they price them. It really comes to how much discount that they can offer.
Because a lot of suppliers
realistically offer on those cards,
shelves, but no one's going to be buying them at the moment.
But again, if you can't get availability, if you're sitting there as a system builder, like preparing to build a system, and you can't get a hold of the stock of a 30 series card for pretty much, months, would you just bite the bullet, Well,
it depends how badly you want to play games.
Yeah. But I think most of the time, I think that the only way that these cards are going to move in volume is going to be in system builds, system integrators, integrating them into builds, selling the whole machine off as a functioning computer, because they can take a bit of margin off, with everything, and take a bit of a hit on every component to bring the pricing down. Whereas trying to bring the pricing down on just that one particular part is going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, that's true. It's also going to be a bit like the Intel 9th gen. I feel like we'll be getting a lot of those going out in system builds because the 10th gen is just so hard to come by. But people that don't know any better are just they say i7.
Well, that's it, and that's the thing. I mean, again, I want a computer. I want an Intel.
Exactly.
What chip do you want? An i7. You're using it in an office. You don't need an i7 to literally type up Word documents.
Yeah, it'll be the same.
But that's because a lot of the non-tech savvy people don't realize that i7s went from 4 cores and 8 threads, to now 8 cores and 16 threads. You know what I mean? They don't realize that disconnect. Like they just went, I want the biggest, so it has to be, I had an i5 last time, and it was a 4-core, 4-thread part. I have to get at least an i7 this time. It was too slow. They don't realize.
They
And of
didn't have
course-
an SSD, and that's why it was slow.
Exactly. I mean, not only that, they've got a Windows operating system that was Windows,
32-bit. Basic.
Windows Vista upgraded to Windows, Windows 7, then upgraded to Windows 8, then upgraded to Windows 10. It hasn't been reinstalled as a fresh install for the last decade. And they're going, oh, but my machine's running so slow. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it so many times that they've like done these upgrades. You go, oh, my system's running so slow. You go into just clean up, and there's like nearly 100 gigabytes of background data and junk sitting in the drive that they haven't cleaned out since the drive was implemented.
And it's going to be like people are going to come in and be like, hey, I'm getting a graphics card, and my mate said that the Nvidia, is that the brand? And you're like, yeah, the Nvidia. And they're like, RTX? Yeah, RTX. And they don't care if it's a 3 or 2000.
That's it. And I mean, again, this is the thing. This is where I think the smart shopper for a person on a really tight budget is going to be the second-hand market, because I think a lot of people have held off. Like, I mean, you think about it. If we're looking at these cards from that perspective, all the even the 1080 Ti, which is a very solid gaming card now today. Like, I mean,
It's a fucking awesome card.
yeah, without obviously the ray tracing, it is a very solid card. That card's going to be essentially online secondhand for next to nothing, because everyone's going to flood the market with their RTX cards. There's going to be obviously even people that are going to probably even be removing on their old 10 series cards. I think we're going to see a lot of secondhand cards hitting the market, and relatively over the next 6 months, if you're looking in the market for a secondhand graphics card, you could pick up some really, really stellar deals, especially if you've got some of these systems that were dual GPU setups in the 2080 Ti, 2080, 1080 Ti, those dual graphics card setups, where they bit of a baller and they just buy the greatest that they can get. I reckon if you were looking at doing a relatively decent build and you're on a really tight budget, you've got your cream of the crop, pick of the stack.
The server's mad buggy, because that's why the guy lost connection.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's why they keep missing the ball.
So is there anything else that you had that you wanted to discuss?
No, I think that's about it.
Just the date when Andy's going to buy us a 3090.
Oh, as soon as they come out, I think he was planning on getting 2.
When our YouTube channel makes $1 million
$1 million
in a year,
In a year, that's like, geez, you gotta have like at least 1,000 subscribers for that.
I think you're a little disconnected on how this whole YouTube thing works.
Well, I said at least, so it could be more.
Yeah, it could be Bill Gates subscribes, and he gives us $1 million to buy a 3090.
What's Division 1?
There's like different divisions of each.
Do you think the 3090 Ti would ever come out?
No.
I reckon it'd be 3090. No, I just reckon it'd be 3090, maybe 3090 advanced.
Evo Plus.
Evo Plus XT.
Z series.
He's in series.
Yeah.
It was extreme automated engineering.
Extreme automated engineering perfected. You got to remember they've perfected it. ASUS engineering automatic extreme perfected. That's them.
I think we'll end the stream there.
Yeah.